How's it going, everyone? It's Caleb Limited here, and today we are going to be talking about Ice Age Continental Drift Arctic games on the Nintendo Wii. I am not familiar with the movie of the same name, not Arctic games, Ice Age Continental Drift. I'm not familiar with this movie at all, never seen it before. So I'm going into this pretty much blind. However, that's not really a big deal because I don't think that this probably follows the story that the movie has. This has its own original cutscenes, and the whole premise of this is just fighting over treasure. And the treasure is just fruit. So you're just playing a bunch of mini games in order to win a big acorn full of fruit. So I highly doubt that that's the same plot as the movie. But I guess if it is, that would be very surprising. But that's the plot of the game. The story mode is the only thing that you'll probably be playing. I don't see anyone who's playing this by themselves playing just single play mode and just picking random mini games. But the story mode in this game, it's just about these pirates versus the regular Ice Age crew fighting over an acorn full of fruit. And the mini games are not great. This is a mini game compilation in which the mini games themselves aren't bad per se, but it's the controls that really ruin it, because this game really relies on the motion controls of the Wii, and they didn't really make sure that those motion controls were tight at all. So, some games the motion controls are really good on, they're really tight on. Sometimes it feels like no matter how you spin the controller, move the controller, it just doesn't really want to go. And I would say that this game definitely lines up with that. You can start turning your controller just a little bit, and it's not really reading it until you do it like a hard turn. And then if you turn your controller hard, it will move, but sometimes you need more precise movements than that. So it just doesn't really work out for a lot of these minigames, especially the minigames where you're sliding down a hill and you're trying to go through different checkpoints and stuff like that, or you're trying to break icicles, or you're trying to collect acorns on these tracks. Like, it just doesn't work for games like that. Now, there's some good mini games on here that still work alright. There's some side-scrolling ones where you're playing as the saber-toothed tigers, and you can run around, you can break the ice, and the whole goal is to get to the bottom of the level as quick as possible by breaking through different pieces of ice. And that one plays fine because you're not using the motion controls. You're using just the directional buttons and the 1 and 2 buttons. So that one works just fine. You have another game that is where you're playing a Scrat, and you launch through the air, and you can press the 1 and 2 button to basically either make Scrat flap his arms around, and he has these leaves tied to his arms so he can flap his arms and he can kind of glide through the air, or you can press another button and he'll nosedive. And you want to basically keep bouncing on trampolines and go as far as you can. I would say that's one of the few minigames in this game that actually uses the motion controls in a pretty good way. And I think it's because it gives you so much time in between each trampoline. So I think that that's why the motion controls work so well, because you have so much time to actually move Scrat around and pilot him. Whereas in, when you're doing the sliding, once you're sliding down the hill, it's all very quick. You're trying to move your character as quick as you can, and this game just doesn't really work with the motion controls at that speed. But this one at least gives you a bit more time to use the motion controls. So this minigame is actually pretty good. And there is another side-scrolling minigame that I like, where you're just trying to get to the end of the level as quick as possible, and you're collecting acorns, and the acorns will also take extra time off of your score. So that one was actually pretty cool. It's another one we were playing as the saber-toothed tigers. It seems like they actually get the best minigames out of the entire game. There's also one where you're sliding turtles, and you're trying to get the turtles into the center of this bullseye, and you can knock the other player's turtles out of the way. I like that one a lot also. The motion controls don't work very well for it again. It's one of those where the motion controls are just really touchy on that one, so it's hard to get right. They really needed to take more time and just try to calibrate those motion controls correctly, but it just felt like, it feels like they didn't even bother trying. So that's kind of unfortunate, because that minigame would have actually been really fun if they would have just tightened up those motion controls a little bit. But still, I like the idea of it. It's a cool idea. I've seen it in other video games and other minigame compilations before, but it's done better in a lot of other minigame compilations. Overall, this is not a good game. This is not a video game I would recommend anyone ever pick up. There is a DS version of this game, and we will talk about that one later on, but this version of the game is just not worth it, in my opinion. I picked this up brand new sealed for $10, and honestly, even brand new sealed, I don't think that this is worth picking up. The only reason I'm even considering keeping this in my collection is because I already have the other Ice Age games on console. So if I get rid of this, technically I wouldn't have a complete collection of the Ice Age games on console. But I'm still kind of struggling to decide if it's even worth keeping this game. It's not like I would even, if I sold this game, to be fair, it's not like I would get much back for it. So, I don't know, maybe it's just best to leave it in the collection. But this is one of those things that I'm not happy to have in my collection. It's not a great game. It's not a good game. It's not even, I would say, an okay game. I would say that this is a pretty bad game, mainly because they just didn't work on tightening those motion controls. And, one thing I gotta say is that it's not reviewers' faults, like, the big companies that review all these games and stuff. It's not their faults, I don't think, but I do have to point this out. I do think that this is part of what happens whenever you bash really games that they put a lot of effort into, and then the developers and the publishers see that those games where there's actually effort get bashed, and then they put this slop out instead, right? Because you had a GameCube Ice Age game that was a 3D platformer that's pretty good. You had the PS3 Ice Age platformer that was really, really good, and they both get completely shat on by reviewers. So if I'm, a publisher, and I see that I'm having teams work on these games, and they're putting a lot of hard work into these games, and they're just getting bashed over and over again, I'm probably going to be like, okay, well, they're going to bash the game either way, you just might as well release crap, and then they'll have something to really complain about. So, is it the reviewers' faults? No, but it is something that I do notice a trend with. I see a lot of people bashing the games, and the more they get bashed, it seems like they just decided to just stop caring more and more and more, and they just released more slop as time went on. And I feel like that was what happened with a lot of these licensed games. Publishers saw that no matter what, these licensed games get bashed, so they just get lazier and lazier with them. I don't know if it's truly the reviewers' faults or not, but it is kind of an interesting thing to notice. This is not a good game, though, and I don't recommend it. I do recommend playing the other Ice Age games, though. The other 3D platformer ones, those are good. Ice Age 2 on GameCube, fantastic. Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs on PS3, fantastic. Play those instead of this one. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.